My mother has always been an avid doll collector. She passed away last year, so I never did find out why she loved them so much. But even when I was a kid, I remember every room being cluttered with dolls. But there was only ever one that truly scared me. My father had stopped at a garage sale on his way home from the store. He had a thing for buying old vintage stuff, like lamps and records, just to fix them up and make them like new. So he often stopped at flea markets and garage sales to see if there was anything that piqued his interest. He came home with this doll. It was the creepiest doll I had ever seen. It was a porcelain piece with wild red hair and a black stained pink dress. His eyes were blue and his lips pursed. My mother guessed it was from the 40s, but went right to work cleaning it up and eventually named her Tabitha. Now, the only doll I ever played with was my American Girl doll. It was the only toy in my room that I touched, actually. My mom, though, decided to put that new doll in my room. I didn't find this weird, as I had a lot of her dolls in my room, and it quite honestly looked a lot like my American Girl doll, except larger and much more run down. And the first few nights were pretty normal. Nothing weird happened. But as the week went on, strange things began occurring in my room. One night in particular, I was awakened by a loud thud. I sat up and saw some of my books that were on my chest of drawers lying on the floor. They were directly behind Tabitha and wedged between the lamp, the wall, and the mirror, so there was no way they could have fallen on their own, especially since they were nowhere near the edge. But I was sleepy and just placed the books back on the chest of drawers. And again, there were a few days with no incident. Then one morning, I went to go brush my teeth and get ready for church. I was in the bathroom when I heard another thud. I went back, looking to see what fell, and saw my American Girl doll on the floor. Now, while I left Tabitha on the flat surface, my American Girl doll had a special case for it that my mother bought specially for me. It was my first ever doll outside of Barbie, so I always kept her in there, and I know I put her in there before I went to sleep. But the case door was open, and she had fallen on the floor. I picked her up and put her back in her case to go finish brushing my teeth. Then I heard yet another thud. And when I went back to my room, there she was, on the floor. I looked around my room, but I didn't see anything. And my mother was in the shower that connected to her in my father's room. And my father had to go into work that day, so he wasn't even in the house. I grabbed my doll and took her into the bathroom with me, thinking maybe that would just solve the problem for now, and perhaps the door was faulty or something. Then that's when I heard it. Again. Another thud. I went back to my room and again, something had fallen, but this time it was Tabitha, and she didn't look like she had fallen. Tabitha had been sitting on the top on her rear and was sitting straight up, and that's exactly how she was sitting on the floor. My American Girl doll had both times landed on her side, but not Tabitha. Now I began to get really freaked out. I didn't want to go in the room, but I knew how much my mom liked that doll, and I didn't want to tell her it fell, so I picked her back up and put her back in her place. A few minutes later, my mother had emerged from the shower ready to go. I had forgotten my children's Bible upstairs in my room, so I went back up to grab it. And when I got there, my jaw dropped, because not only was Tabitha back on the floor, sitting upright with her back towards the door, but this time, her head had been turned around 180 degrees, so she was now looking me in my eyes. Completely scared, I ran downstairs and told my mom what had happened with the doll. She didn't believe me and went upstairs to put Tabitha back so we could leave for church. When we got home from church, I asked her to move it into a different room. So she put Tabitha in the living room on top of the china cabinet. We lived in that house for another 10 years before we moved, and every now and again, something on the china cabinet would fall. We had picture frames, trinkets, and other dolls, and all of them would fall periodically. All of them except Tabitha. I swear it was Tabitha, but my parents didn't think anything of it. They thought maybe one of us was hitting the cabinet with maybe the vacuum, or just being careless in general and bumping into it. The falls only stopped when we moved out of the house. So maybe it wasn't Tabitha that was actually doing it. Maybe it was some sort of spirit or something. I don't know. I'm just glad it all eventually came to an end. As a kid, I was one of those boys who absolutely hated anything girly. Like, I mean really hated it. As in, I swore up and down girls had cooties until I was 10. And that's why when my little sister was gifted with my mom's doll, Hannah, for Christmas, I made a fake barking noise. I was just being a horrible older brother because I knew my sister always wanted it. I personally hated the thing. It had eerily large eyes and wavy brown hair. The dress was blue, and she would fit it with white shoes to tie the outfit together. It had one of those faces where the eyes seem to follow you wherever you go. But it was a fairly heirloom that had been passed down since my great-grandmother's time, so it was only natural that my sister would get it. And my sister dragged that thing everywhere with her, except to school. And being the older brother, I picked on her a lot for it. Weeks went by without anything weird or strange happening. However, I was in my room one night playing my Nintendo 64 when my sister appeared in the doorway. I told her to go away without taking my eyes from the screen. That's when she walked in front of the screen, blocking my view. I yelled at her to move, but she didn't. Instead, my sister gave me a warning. Marta said to stop making fun of her. I gave her a strange look. Who is Marta? She then held up the doll and repeated herself. Marta said, stop making fun of her. I looked my sister up and down. She looked a mess. Her pajamas were wrinkled and her hair disheveled. Her eyes looked dull, almost like she wasn't looking at anything in particular. I told her to get out of my room or I would tell her mom, but she didn't move. Enraged, I got up and pulled her out. She started crying. I grabbed Hannah from her before shutting the door and locking it. She started banging on my door, demanding that I give her Hannah, whom she kept referring to as Marta. I dropped the doll on the floor and went back to playing my game, or a few minutes later until my dad made me unlock the door. He took us both into his room and scolded us on sharing and being nice. After the lecture, my dad told me to give Hannah back to my sister, so I returned to my room only to find my door closed. I didn't remember my dad or myself closing it, but I brushed it off and entered my room. I looked into the corner of my room where I tossed Hannah, but she wasn't there. I checked all the corners of my room, but I couldn't find her. I went out into the hallway to look for her, thinking maybe she somehow was on the other side of the door and I just missed it. But I still couldn't find her. And my sister and dad were now downstairs watching TV, and my sister didn't have Hannah. I looked all over the second floor, but couldn't find her. Eventually, I went into my sister's room and, well, there she was. Hannah was just laying on my sister's bed like she had never been moved. I was a little freaked out, but I figured maybe my mom went into my room and got it while my dad yelled at us. This isn't where the story ends, though. A couple days later, I started making fun of my sister and Hannah again, and of course, my dad scolded me. But later that same night, my sister came in my room while I was playing video games again and sat Hannah on my desk. I told her to get out and to take that freak show doll with her, but instead, she turned and faced me. Marta said to stop making fun of her. This time, when she said it, it sounded more like a statement instead of an instruction like before. I got up and pushed her out of my room, but this time, my sister didn't whine or cry. She didn't even fight. She just walked down the hallway towards her room. I turned around and realized she had left the doll on my desk, so I grabbed it and stuffed it under my bed so I wouldn't have to look at it anymore. And I played games for another hour before falling asleep. I woke up in the middle of the night to a shuffling noise. The only light in the room was static from the TV screen. I got up to go to turn off my N64, but the cartridge wasn't in the system. Now, I'm a really avid gamer, and as all gamers know, you never take the cartridge out of the game system while it's still on. I thought maybe my sister snuck in and did it while I was asleep. It was late, so I couldn't do anything about it without waking my parents, so I swore revenge on my sister in the morning and climbed back into bed. But when I woke up again, my room was a mess. All my clothes had been pulled from their hangers and from their drawers and were all over my bedroom floor. Angry, I went to my sister's room to yell at her for entering my room without my permission, but she was still asleep. I went back to my room and began picking up some of my clothes. I was circulating my room when I turned at the corner of my bedpost and dropped everything. In the corner next to my bed was Hannah. She was sitting upright against the wall with her head tilted to the side, almost as if she was looking up at me. I remembered what my sister said about not making fun of the doll the night before, and I was officially over this doll. I was completely creeped out and began wondering if the doll was responsible, but mostly, I just wanted it out of my room, so I picked Hannah up and shrieked. Because underneath Hannah, with the Super Smash Bros. Cartridge I had been playing last night when I fell asleep. It was on the opposite side of the room from the console. Now, I didn't mention this to anyone. Instead, I just put the doll back on my sister's nightstand and cleaned up my room. I was entirely too freaked out to say anything or bring it up. My sister did say something that freaked me out later that day, though. While we were eating, my parents got up to do the dishes, and my sister leaned in and whispered, "Marta said you learned your lesson." My sister and I are teenagers now, and I'm on my way to college. My sister hasn't played with Hannah in a long time, and nothing strange happened after that. But that doll still gives me the creeps.